French people got to know of the land, so they came with a mind and will. Though the British want back the land, the French country's here with us still. Non è bella, non è quadri, non è gente che fa sempre cose, e le come turi sulle bumene pilaja, e pakite yo podam ni kodu, pakite yo podam ni kodu. Yes, after you we live on in the sun, the wind and rain. French, Caribbean, African, British, we are unique, oh yes, my friend. Now we are on our own at last. No one else must push us wrong. We are going to be a great nation. Our children are bright and strong. Non è bella, non è quadri, non è gente che fa sempre cose, e le come turi sulle bumene pilaja, e pakite yo podam ni kodu, pakite yo podam ni kodu. Non è bella, non è quadri, non è gente che fa sempre cose, e le come turi sulle bumene pilaja, e pakite yo podam ni kodu, 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 pakite yo podam ni
Dominica, the land of beauty, the land of verdure and glorious sunshine. Our hills and rivers are viewed with envy by those who stay here, even for a while.
Here are so long, so great and beautiful, as we sing of your mountains, Cicero and Manico,
Of the mountains, valleys, rivers, flowers too.
of the birds and bravo, countries in the sun. Oh yes, it is certain, you're a happy land. Oh yes, it is certain, you're a happy land. Land of the orange, grapefruit and mango, land of banana, the lime and cocoa. We are such flowers, such leafy flowers. You can be certain that's a happy land. Here is a land so great and beautiful, as we sing of your mountains, Cicero and Manico,
Of the mountains, valleys, rivers, flowers too.
of the birds and bravo, countries in the sun. Oh yes, it is certain, you're a happy land. Oh yes, it is certain, you're a happy land. So bring your parents, your sons and daughters, for a vacation in Dominica, and we assure you, when you return home, you say, oh yes sir, that's a happy land. Here are so land, so green and beautiful, as we sing of your mountains, Cicero and Manico,
Of the mountains, valleys, rivers, flowers too.
of the birds and bravo, countries in the sun. Oh yes, it is certain, you're a happy land. Oh yes, it is certain, you're a happy land. Oh yes, it is certain, you're a happy land. Oh yes, it is certain.
C'est petit petit qui capelle, ouais, mais dormi. Color de guia, pesanana, tout dit que wangu mango. Et les bois, les petits garçons qui gâtent Vegas, tout ça d'ailleurs. C'est vite ça la capa, jamais bon. Ti vite là, nous les bébés, on dit pas nous toutes ces bagages.
Soyez ok tapé. Smiles of the boys are golden, her curly ringlets of their eyes are golden. Each time she passes, you can hear them whisper, sure she's a jewel that my heart is after. Oh, walks a swing makes my heart much lighter. Oh, eyes so gleaming makes my heart much faster. Oh, shade, watch me a bit longer. I'd love to get her to weep upon my shoulder. I'll be the mixala, gane mwapiti mama. Ay, 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 ay. I'm gonna gane pututa.
She wears a tail with the grace of Frenchman, and a señorita, she is sure to excel. She's simply charming, and then soon is charming. While again she's tiring, she feels like a spring on string.
I'll be the mixala, gane mwapiti mama. Ay, 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 ay. I'm gonna gane pututa.
No more of longing and no more of pleading. If she would only give me up a hearing. And no, she wonders, laugh the words up yonder. All around the smiling, sort of nature's wonder.
I'll be the mixala, gane mwapiti mama. Ay, 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 ay. I'm gonna gane pututa. She's a gift of nature, Dominican pure. Enchanting beauty, Dominican shore. Legend like dewdrops, fresh fruits and flowers. The breezy sunshine, the breeze upon the shores. I'll be the mixala, gane mwapiti mama. Ay, 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 ay. I'm gonna gane pututa. Ay, 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 ay.
Merci mon Dieu, Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Dami coupe, on y en a si peu. À histoire nous, vous êtes un pays qui cache avec tout le monde. Aïe aïe aïe, c'est un paradis. Merci mon Dieu, Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Domingo wish,
Unico del sol, vedi l'alpe, uniquale tango mostole banda.
aïe aïe aïe, c'est un paradis. Merci mon Dieu, Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Domingo joli, on est la majorité, à son seul côté. On est la mer caribéenne qui toujours calme. Aïe aïe aïe, c'est un paradis. Merci mon Dieu, Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Domingo bon,
Nous différents passés, yes les autres côtés. C'est le picado, nous ça passe à replacer.
aïe aïe aïe, c'est un paradis. Merci mon Dieu, Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Domingo doux, au vanillage, dans les autres côtés, on y a dans sa famille belle et plaisant. Aïe aïe aïe, c'est un paradis. Merci mon Dieu, Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Merci mon Dieu, Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Ipania Yankee coupe ça.
Ipania est plus belle que ça.
Merci mon Dieu.
visions and light. Oh, Dominica, I'm so glad I can call you
island in the West Indies. Discovered by Columbus, but already inhabited by the Caribs, it was fought over by the French and British and was for some time a centre for the slave trade. When the slaves were freed in 1833, Eugenia Charles' grandfather was among them. Now it's a laid-back, underdeveloped jewel in the wide Sargasso Sea, which has produced one of only 4 women prime ministers in the world.
After I became prime minister in 1980, the world seemed to make quite a thing of it that there was another woman prime minister in a small Caribbean island. And it hadn't struck Dominicans that there was anything peculiar about having a woman prime minister. I was the leader of the party had won. It was obvious that I was the prime minister. It was only the world reaction outside that made us stop to think, well, it is true, there are not so many of them in the world, and we have one of them. I think that Dominican women are strong, and maybe I shouldn't say it, but I think the pattern of family life makes for that, because there is a high rate of illegitimacy in Dominica. I mean, marriage is not the norm in Dominica. Many people do not get married, and yet have families. And there's nobody thinks anything of it, really. And I think as a result, women have learned to be father and mother and therefore run the household, and so they have had to be strong. I think that men just don't want to be tied, like the flit around. And if a woman becomes too possessive, then they move away immediately and look for something else, somebody else. Many people thought that my father was the strong man of the family, but we who lived closer to them knew that my mother was in fact the boss of the family. She didn't always express it that way. She'd probably say, your father requires you to do, but we knew very well that it was her own idea and that she was getting her way in the way she wanted it. Achievement seems to have been the thing always. What are you going to do with your life? How are you getting on? And, I remember at school, for instance, that I was in a class of 30 at one time, and I came out about 14th. My mother said, that's nonsense. You haven't done any work this year, And then the next year I came out 7th. She says, still is no use to us. And I moved into a small class of 7 people. And I came out 3rd. He said, that's still just halfway. You haven't done anything any better. So she wasn't satisfied until I came first in the class. And it wasn't that they pushed you, it was just that they expected you to do things.
Thanks to her parents, Eugenia Charles was able to study law both in Toronto and then in London. She was eager to see the world, but like many daughters, returned home to look after her aging mother and father. When she came back to the capital, Roseau, most other highly qualified Dominicans were leaving for good.
It was quite an event the night I returned home to Dominica. I was admitted to practice at the bar that very same night. And it was the first time that a Dominican woman lawyer being called to the bar. There was one other woman lawyer there, but she was a Trinidadian married to a male Dominican lawyer. And so I just went into practice and enjoyed it for 30 years. It was really good.
She's never married. Her father lived to 107. He died recently. She ran her law firm with no thought of politics. That was a new midlife career. She came in at 50, somewhat unwillingly.
In politics, women have taken great part, and they've always done a great deal. But they have not many of them, not in the same proportion, have they become active politicians. And yet it was not surprising when I became a politician. I don't think anybody stopped and gazed to think a woman was talking. I was not the first woman politician here. The other 2 were English, but there were other women politicians before me. And so I think that people accept that women should take part in politics, and that if more women don't take part, because they don't like the slander, the dirty fighting that goes with politics. I wasn't a member of any party. I thought, as a taxpayer, I had a right to talk. So anytime something was going wrong, I'd write a little nasty letter to the Chronicle, very short, to the newspaper, finding fault with something that was being done. And apparently those letters needled the people who were in authority. And so they decided to extend the Seditious and Undesirable Publications Act, amend it so that you really couldn't criticize government. It went so far that if you were overheard criticizing them in the privacy of a bedroom, you could be arrested for it. We called it the Shut Your Mouth Bill.
It was the Shut Your Mouth Bill that spurred Eugenia into forming her own Freedom Party, which now governs Dominica. She is, some say, autocratic. The opposition feels she acts too readily without consultation. She heads 3 ministries as well as being Prime Minister: Foreign Affairs, Finance and Economic Development. But she is certainly not corrupt. Even the opposition admits she doesn't have her fingers in the till. She looks back on her early days in politics, the 60s and 70s, as a murky period in Dominica's affairs. Partial Home Rule from Britain after 1967 left the country and the ruling Labour Party to its own vices. There were frequent attempts to clamp down on free speech. Power was in the hands of very few, with no adequate checks on government. And debate in the National Assembly, as Miss Charles, then opposition leader, recalls it, was often unconstructive.
The government party spent their time abusing me in the House, and it really only strengthened me, and I learned to completely ignore them. In fact, I learned not to hear what they said. I remember one particular one, because I got a good repartee, that's why I remember it. They said, well, this woman talking to me can't possibly understand the suffering of children and women because she's never felt the pangs of childbirth. So at that point, I got up and said to the Speaker that, on a point of order, I thought that all these men in the front row belonged in the zoo because they had also felt, they apparently had felt the pangs of childbirth. So there were peculiar animals who belonged in the zoo. And there were other things like that they would abuse you about. And it brought me a lot of sympathy, because the women didn't like to hear another woman being abused. And even some of their own supporters felt, why are they going on that tack? Why don't they get down to issues instead of trying to abuse a woman because she was in politics? I've never ever felt that, if you were a man you could have done this, but you can't. Except perhaps a lot of politicking is done in the rum shops, and I'm not good in the rum shops.
In 1978, Dominica was granted full independence from Britain, although it remained a Commonwealth country. Eugenia Charles was opposed to independence. She felt Dominica wasn't ready for it, but the formalities went ahead. Princess Margaret flew in from Mustique to represent the Queen. But behind the scenes, Patrick John, then Prime Minister, was plotting his own future along with various business friends. He planned to turn a large part of the island into a free port with an oil refinery, a front for laundering goods for South Africa. John's closest associate in the deal was Don Pearson. Eugenia Charles minced no words in her condemnation of him.
The man's a phony. I mean, anybody can see it the first time you meet him. I certainly detected it, and I would have thought that the others in government should have done the same.
Stories of corruption in Dominica attracted the attention of the world's press. Eugenia Charles bode her time in the wings, and Prime Minister John continued to prevaricate.
My telegram. I told you that it was inopportune to meet me this time. It's very difficult now to talk about the future.
Yes. And we also hope to give you the opportunity of answering your critics.
Even after Eugenia Charles' election victory a year later, Patrick John planned to overthrow her.
People began getting more and more annoyed about it. And as a result, the populists revolted. Not only the political parties, not only the trade unions, but the people of the country revolted and asked that he leave office. And in the end, he had to leave. I really feel that Patrick John had thought that he was the first Prime Minister and he should be Prime Minister forever. He continued to plot against the state with the weirdest group of people from North America, both Canada and the States. Ku Klux Klan, Nazis, and all sorts of funny people. All of them had one thing in common. They don't like black people. And yet he was plotting with them for them to take over this country, make it into a little drug haven, legalize marijuana, put up a coke factory here, etc., etc. He went through the courts and several appeals, but the courts found that he was wrong and they've imprisoned him on a 12-year sentence.
Patrick John is still in jail just outside Roseau. His proximity must be of concern to Eugenia Charles. One thwarted coup involved an attempt to release him from jail. Living alone, guarded only by a couple of military policemen, does she worry about her safety?
You keep your eyes and ears open, because if people can't get in by the ballot box, they will try to get in by the bullet. But I don't live in constant fear it's going to happen. I don't go to bed always thinking that I'm going to wake up dead the next morning.
She did take the precaution of disarming the unreliable National Defence Force. Her pretext was reports of soldiers trading guns for marijuana. There is no military presence now, only her trusted policemen.
I first took away the guns and there was a lot of criticism. I had a British military advisor come down and tell me, you can't have an army without arms. And I said, I have a country without money, so why not an army without arms?
There was another force that helped bring Eugenia Charles to power in the throes of the Patrick John affair. Hurricane David struck Dominica in August 1979. It devastated the banana crop, killed 42 people, and left 3/4 of the population homeless. The interim government, which had replaced John, was helpless. Dominicans now sought a strong leader.
When we came in 1980, it was not an easy task to face this, because Hurricane David had taken place just 12 months before, and the devastation had been great. And people were still living in tents. Very little being done in that year. I suppose we spent the time politicking and electioneering rather than trying to build the country back. And so there was a lot to do when we came in. And then economically, Dominica was on its last legs. I mean, there was no money in the treasury, we were in debt, we were had not been paying our installments of debt, and if you don't do that, you can't get any more money to borrow. But we were able, because we're independent, to go into the IMF, and we were able to go into program with them.
Foreign aid became the cornerstone of Prime Minister Charles' economic policies. She has no qualms about pricking the colonial conscience of France and Britain. She welcomed with the open arms of a political acolyte the deal the Americans were offering. All three countries flexed their military muscles for the celebrations of the 10th anniversary of independence.
Right now we're at anchor, however, in the morning we'll be going pierside, and then the British ship, the HMS Active, will moor outboard of us. The French minesweeper will be moored just to the north of us, and from that point on...
Are you going to be walking across the ships?
Yes, you'll be walking across King to get to the British ship. So all of the ships, I believe, will be dressing ship with all of our flags on both Wednesday the 3rd and on Thursday the 4th.
This would be a bad time for anybody to try a revolution, would it?
Yes, ma'am.
But revolutions do happen in the Caribbean, and the United States tends to take them very seriously indeed. In 1983, Maurice Bishop, the Prime Minister of neighbouring Grenada, was killed by radicals within his own party during a left-wing coup d'etat.
The Grenada issue was a simple one. For years we had seen what was happening in Grenada, and all of these islands were scared that it was only a matter of time before the same thing would happen to them.
Eugenia Charles, chair of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, invited the U.S. to invade.
We have taken this decisive action for three reasons. First, and of overriding importance, to protect innocent lives, including up to 1,000 Americans whose personal safety is, of course, my paramount concern. Second, to forestall further chaos. And third, to assist in the restoration of conditions of law and order and of governmental institutions to the island of Grenada, where a brutal group of leftist thugs violently seized power, killing the Prime Minister, 3 cabinet members, 2 labor leaders, and other civilians, including children.
This is a question about asking for support. We are one region. Grenada is part and parcel of us, an organization, and we don't have the capacity ourselves to see to it that Grenadians get the freedom that they require to have to choose their own government.
The fighting was over in 2 or 3 days. The diplomatic storm went on long after. The Americans were accused of aggression in their first combat attack since the withdrawal from Vietnam. Comparisons were made immediately with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Recrimination followed recrimination. As things went back to normal on the streets of Grenada, the governor was criticized. Grenada is a Commonwealth country. He should, it was argued, have consulted the Queen. Eugenia Charles claimed it was the governor who'd begged for help from her and the Americans.
Well, I wouldn't, perhaps if I was quote invited the invasion, what he did do was ask us for assistance. You know, he said, oh, you must do something. Something must be done by you all because the situation cannot be allowed to continue. I don't know that he was even thinking of our coming in as a rescue mission. I don't know what he had in mind at the time, but he just was desperate that something had to be done, and it couldn't be left as it was.
Dennis Healey doubted the governor was involved at all. He called Charles a liar. Britain smarted at the snub to the Reagan-Thatcher special relationship, and a House of Commons investigation found Sir Geoffrey Howe's approach somewhat lethargic. Eugenia Charles still defends her action.
In Britain at that time, amazingly enough, your Prime Minister was away from the country, and so was Sir Geoffrey Howe. They were in Portugal and Spain. I don't know which was where, but in Portugal and Spain. Not easy to get in touch with at the time. And so we went to the Americans for help. But we went to them before I went to America. It was because on the Sunday morning, the Beirut massacre took place. And on the Sunday afternoon, the top official of the Army of Cuba landed in Grenada. And that was what sent me off the next day to America, to ask them to hurry up. If they were going to help us, it was necessary to do it quickly.
The Grenada affair gave Eugenia Charles a profile in world affairs out of proportion with Dominica's size or strategic importance. She had, though, fulfilled her election pledge to be a Liberal Democrat and anti-communist.
In the same circumstances arose again or arose here in that way. I would welcome American production. I would have to, because what we found when we were doing the Grenada thing is that we didn't have the manpower ourselves to do it.
In Roseau today, cabinet meetings vary from elevated questions of international security to the basics of rubbish collection, always preceded by a prayer.
May there be lasting prosperity and peace. We ask this, your Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. I thought without an agenda this week that it would be a good chance to talk about some of the other things that we've been putting off. But perhaps the most important one is the garbage disposal. We can't go and do as we want. You remember I said last time I thought we should go back to donkey and cart days because it was much cleaner. And so we're thinking of this method where you have skips, as they call these things. You've seen them in larger cities. When there's a construction site, they have a huge skip, they're putting all the rubble in. And the skips could be made here. We'd order the first few, but they actually could be welded here, which would be a good thing. I think the basis of garbage collection, in fact, is that the people themselves do their own work. That they no longer just drop it on the ground and a person comes and picks it up for them. That they put it right then into the container, and so the container goes away. That alone means a cleaner town. So that people do most of the work themselves.
Eugenia Charles' first task was to clear up after the hurricane. Her mission all along has been to pick Dominica up by its bootstraps, cleaning up corruption and building roads. She takes a maternal view of Dominicans, but won't pamper them. Her priorities are not in welfare, but in self-help. She feels the people of Dominica lend themselves naturally to small enterprise. Small businesses are certainly the norm, and trading is a livelihood for many, carrying goods by small boat to and from Guadeloupe, Martinique, St. Lucia and St. Kitts. Eugenia Charles sees the hucksters as a symbol of this private enterprise. They're women who buy surplus fruit and vegetables and ship them to the more developed islands, returning with electrical and plastic goods. They're the Tupperware ladies of the Caribbean. But they're often trading out of necessity rather than some indigenous mercantile spirit. There's no dole money in Dominica. Bananas, though, are the mainstay of the Dominican economy. They're grown not on plantations, but on small holdings. Private ownership, like trade, is what the Prime Minister believes every Dominican wants.
The Dominicans have the history of wanting to own their own land. And I don't know where it comes from, where the pattern comes from, but it's something that's very strong in all Dominicans, that they should be able to have a title, what they say in patois, anti-papier, for their land. And I think that's a very good and very healthy sign too. And they want to be able to leave it for the child that they want to leave it for whom they want to leave it. They don't want it tied in any other way. You know, they really want to be able to be free to do with the land what they want. And I think that's a very good thing. The Dominican farmers growing accustomed to the banana, he knows how to work with it, he likes working with it, and he has seen it as a means of livelihood to it. And he's done pretty well out of it in the last year or two. And so that's why I say it's a mainstay and it's so important and nothing else can replace it.
The bananas make up nearly half of the island's exports. Dependence on any one crop is a dangerous practice, and Miss Charles admits they should diversify. But the banana is too tempting. It's always been seen in the West Indies as the cash crop to counter communism, a steady income direct into the farmer's pocket. The Prime Minister is loath, though, to meddle with the economy.
When you're also free market, free enterprise, and we encourage people to do things for themselves. When we came in, we found that the past government wanted to be the be-end and end-all of everything, and everything had to start from government. Because I don't think that government should completely take over on people. I think government is there to encourage people to be responsible, do their own things, and to put the measures in place which will help them to do this. And this is what we've been doing.
Are you enjoying it? Yes, I like to see it.
How are you?
I know you are here.
Are you all right?
Yeah.
Happy holiday.
Thank you.
You too. Okay, fine.
Once a week, the banana boat comes in. It's owned or chartered by Geest and sails its cargo to Barry in South Wales. A radio announcement tells farmers the docking time, and the rush begins to cut the bananas, box and drive them to the company's coastal depots. Geest have a virtual monopoly in Dominica. In Britain, their Windward Island fruit has first priority in the market, an arrangement known as the Banana Protocol. But many Dominicans feel Geest have had it too good for too long. They don't pay enough, it's said, for the bananas or for shift work. Workers are taken on only 1 or 2 days a week. Eugenia Charles, though, is grateful for an assured buyer.
I think it's always good to produce, but unless you have a person prepared to buy it, you're producing for nothing. So Greece is the one who, not introduced, but certainly took on and made the banana take off in Dominica. So we're very glad that they did that. We have a contract with them every 2 years. I think it's negotiated. And we negotiate very hard and very bitterly to get every cent we can out of Greece. But we realize that they also have to make a profit or they wouldn't bother buy our bananas.
There are signs the Dominican banana grower may be thrown out into the real world before long. It may not always be possible to have preferential treatment.
We're very grateful for the fact that Britain has, for the past few years, supported our bananas and allowed us preference into the British market. Now with the common market coming in, an open market, a free market for Europe in 1992, on the surface, it shouldn't affect us. The bananas we ship into Britain, we just ship more into Europe. But that isn't so because Holland and Denmark and West Germany have always been buying from the Latin American countries. And they can produce bananas at a much cheaper rate.
There was such alarm in the islands at the prospect of the European single market that a conference was called to discuss its possible consequences. Eugenia Charles travelled to London to defend Dominica and the protected banana trade. To an audience of Eurocrats, she appealed again to the idea of the banana as a stabilising anti-communist force.
We have been telling our farmers at home the truth, but perhaps not the whole truth, that in fact they need not fear 1992 if they produce excellent bananas from now, that they will be able to find a market. What we have not added is that this depends on Europe doing the right thing by us, because both of these are required. We want good bananas, excellent bananas to export, but we also want, and let us not pretend, we want a preferential market. I know that when you talk of free trade, you can't talk of protection. I understand that. But you have to find a phrase that will cover what we require, and that is we must have protection in the market for bananas. You know, I like to say, and it is already mentioned here, what would happen if we lost the banana industry in the Windwards. And I like to say to all of you here that the world would have to pay a lot much more for a peacekeeping force than they would for paying a little bit more for our good bananas on the European market.
Prime Minister, thank you very much. It's clear you struck a chord. Now, anybody else want to speak on the banana issue?
Europe made no promises, but Eugenia Charles was here to lobby, and lobby she did, trading on her reputation as a senior Caribbean head of government.
Well, I'm glad to hear of this. I'll follow this up.
Yeah, and even though we won't get the money immediately, because it takes time, at least the university could borrow money. You know, but it's important that the EEC must agree to refund this time, because you don't usually refund. You don't usually let us spend and then give us back the money.
From straight-talking the European Commission to tea and British politics. A curiosity about Labour's black sections and a word of advice.
And I think the name, there's a problem with the name. You know, black sections, it's a problem. Yeah. Well, that's right. I think that one of the things that they have agreed is that they will change the name.
A visit to London would be incomplete without a courtesy call to the other Iron Lady.
Hello, welcome. Please come. Now, shall we do our customary? How do you feel? George, you all got a good picture? That's right. Those both? All right. Very good.
They talked business, in particular British aid for developing a new airstrip in Dominica. On the surface, the two women would seem alike in more ways than their iron resolve. Prime Minister Charles points to the differences and to the similarities.
My great admiration with Mrs. Thatcher is this, that she, you may not always like the policy she's carrying out, but there's no doubt at all that she sincerely believes in them. She's not being a hypocrite about them. She sees no other way of doing it, and she sincerely believes in what she's doing. And that, I think, we share.
And they certainly share one aim, to go on and on.
The celebration of the 10th anniversary of our independence provides a fitting occasion for national stock-taking. Friends, I have given much thought, deep thought, to my continued involvement in the politics of this our beloved country. I have decided to lead my party into the next general elections and to go on for one further full term. There is much left to be done. I am energized by your support. I am fortified. I am fortified by your recognition and appreciation of our steadfast leadership. I am sustained by your patience. I will not abandon. I will not give up. I will not give up until our international airport is under construction. Until all our major feeder roads have been constructed, until our rural electrification program has been completed, until pipe-borne water is available in all villages of this country.
Building an international airport is the Prime Minister's most ambitious project. The island is mountainous and rugged, and there is no obvious site for it. Fast-flowing rivers cut through even the flatter stretches of land, and an airstrip of international size would be immensely costly, not only in terms of finance, but to the island's delicately balanced ecology. But she feels there's no hope of attracting business or tourism without it. Aid, she sees, is the answer.
It requires so much capital to put the infrastructure in to really set us on our feet so that we can develop better economically. But I'm quite sure that if I can get an airport that can take larger planes than we take now, and it can be lit, so we can use the airport for more than 6 hours a day, and so we could develop tourism, it would bring a lot of jobs, and I think it would help us economically. If we can get all the feeder roads in for the person in the country, get the water system established, get a tourist jetty established for cruise ships, that we would have good figures in employment and everybody earning. And we wouldn't be a rich country, but we'd be able to stand on our own feet. And that's what my goal is.
There are serious worries among the opposition about Miss Charles' high-tech aid-fed projects. They feel the island is threatened, that development for tourism would destroy the lives of its people. It is, for most of the population, a simple life. Nobody goes hungry, and there are no casinos or hard drugs to corrupt the young. But most believe it's only a matter of time before Dominica goes the way of other Caribbean islands, a tropical paradise for the rich. For the moment, local colour is, for the most part, for themselves. And on a national holiday, the Prime Minister herself is resplendent in the most traditional form of the national costume. The checked madras fabrics, layered petticoats, silken shawl and cap tell the story of colonial rule. The tastes of the slave women combine with the fashion of the 18th century French. Dominica's own Jingping music survives. It's softer than salsa or reggae, with touches of the French accordion and the African drum. Public appearances on such social occasions are for the Prime Minister more a duty than a pleasure.
I'm not a crowd person. Of course, politics takes you into a larger number of people. But I'm a loner person. I personally like to do things on my own, be on my own.
And contestant number 7, Joan George.
A lot of people have asked me why it is I've never married. I mean, I didn't make any deliberate intention not to marry. But I think the way I've lived, the things I've been doing, have kept me from having any close, long relationships with anybody that would end up in marriage. And really, it would be kind of hard on a man to be married to me because he probably called Regina George his husband all the time. And nobody likes that. My brother gets annoyed because when he's called Regina George's brother, he says, no, Regina George is my sister. And I think that I think I've been able to do a better job, quite frankly, because I'm single, I'm free, I'm able to do things, I'm able to spend all the time I want on matters of state. And I think that has helped a great deal.
The body and the blood of Christ.
Eugenia Charles is a religious woman, a practicing Catholic, committed to clean living.
The body and the blood of Christ.
At 70, she shows every sign of continuing the Charles family tradition of longevity. She's carved a place for herself in the Caribbean, filling a vacuum left by leaders like Tom Adams, Edward Seaga, and Maurice Bishop. To her electors, she's a stern, grandmotherly figure, hated and feared by some, but still one of few prime ministers who dares walk freely among the people, friend or foe.
I feel like one of the people. I don't feel apart from them. And I get a lot of strength from them and from the support and from the fact that you can listen to what they want, and not always can you give them what they want, but you can sometimes give them what they need. And I think I get strength from that.
How are you? I don't know if they have Yes, I walked down, but I see.
The BBC wishes to thank the United States Department of Defense for the use of archive material of Grenada.
Christopher Columbus came upon this island on November the 3rd, 1493. It was a Sunday, so he called it Dominica for the Lord. Devil Mountain, near the Valley of Desolation, place names which bear witness to what its people have been through. A choir made up of the sons and daughters of plantation workers, people who work the bananas and coconuts on one of the biggest plantations, the plantation owned by Robert Douglas, the man everyone calls RBD. RBD named his second son Roosevelt for the president. The kids he takes down to the beach call him Rosie. Montreal Sir George Williams University, February 1969. Rosie, a Sir George graduate on a master's at McGill, helps organize a computer center sit-in. Rosie is 36 now. Every Sunday morning, he can be found under the almond tree at the beach at Portsmouth. Tension builds as the occupation at Sir George continues. Rosie contacts John Diefenbaker.
Well, I phoned Diefenbaker because...
The former Prime Minister had helped Rosie get into Canada to study. Rosie reciprocated by working for the Diefenbaker Tories. Now Diefenbaker advises the university to let them freeze in the dark.
If the students occupied any section of the building during winter, they should turn the heat off and let them freeze to death.
Fire hoses drove police back when they charged the barricades. All hell broke loose inside. A handful of the 97 occupiers, Rosie not among them, set fire to the computer and scattered its cards across 2 city blocks. $2 million damage, Canada's most expensive student riot. Rosie lost 65 pounds in a Canadian jail. He served a year and a half. Out of prison, Rosie was a changed, if not chastened man, but the RCMP regarded him as dangerous and in 1976 had him deported.
Well, I go back to Dominica, the island I was born, and the thing is, my life will always be threatened there because of the barbaric kind of laws, the almost medieval laws which have been passed in Dominica.
The Douglas plantation. Back home, Rosie's life was not in danger, but his father's peace of mind was. R.B. Douglas locks up the coconut factory, and Rosie is on his mind. Mr. Douglas sent Rosie to Ontario's Guelph University to get a degree in agriculture. Rosie got the degree, but came back and organized his father's workers into a union. Having gone $6,000 in debt to pay some of Rosie's legal expenses, Mr. Douglas was not amused. He cleared $30,000 last year, but with 26 children, it doesn't go very far. But his plantation does go far, stretching all the way to the Caribbean Sea. Rosie, we're here right in the middle of your father's estate. There's acres of bananas and coconut. What would you do if he were able to leave it to you? Would you give it away to the workers?
Well, I wouldn't give it away, but I would try to develop it in a manner which would allow the workers on the estate to enjoy a decent standard of living.
Bananas are the problem, and Rosie says he has solutions. The island is locked into a one-crop economy, selling all to a big British banana corporation. The small grower earns 6 cents a pound, or less than $2 for a 35-pound bunch. He may have to tote them 2 miles through a rainforest before coming to a road, where likely as not he must pay someone else to truck them to market. Dominica is an associate state, soon to be independent from Britain. What she is in reality is a banana republic. The situation is ripe for radicalism, and in a place called Grand Bay, the drums beat out a song against the CIA. Here, the most successful slave uprisings occurred, and recently a plantation owner was burned out. Because of its radical tradition, Rosie made his headquarters in Grand Bay. With moral support from the Cuban government, Rosie is organizing hard around gut issues, setting up a canning cooperative and a literacy project. He's also trying to get Canadian aid money to build a road and buy a truck for remote banana growers.
That road constructed, they're in deep trouble. I mean, what are the chances from your experience as minister?
The fact that Rosie stands to the left of his brother Michael means trouble for Michael, eldest of the Douglas sons, and member of Parliament representing the family seat, Portsmouth. The marketplace at Portsmouth on a Saturday is a hive of activity as people flock here to buy fresh provisions like mangoes and breadfruit. The Douglas family dominates here as they do everywhere else in Portsmouth. They have the store next door to the marketplace where they sell canned goods and liquor. The marketplace is in Michael Douglas's constituency. So like any good politician, Michael Douglas knows that market day is the day to make political hay.
I don't think at this time Rosie, holding the philosophies that he does, that he could be part of a political party that I am in. He would have to move a lot more towards the center, and I don't see him doing that.
What helps Rosie run are checks, like the $100 he gets every month from a sympathetic Saskatchewan doctor. Rosie saves money by living at home, even though his father sent him a lawyer's letter ordering him out after Rosie organized the Douglas workers. The family's Easter picnic was Mr. Douglas' first afternoon off in years. He's 72. Grandson of a freed slave, at 23 he made $1 a day and somehow saved $700 in 2 years. He bought land and never looked back. He was elected twice to the legislature, telling constituents, I give you a job on my estate, credit at my store, a dress for a christening, and a coffin when you die. All I ask is that you vote for me. All 16 children finished high school. 6 have university degrees. Many are away. Eisenhower working on a master's in Connecticut, Adenauer studying business in New York, Marina learning management in West Germany, and McIntyre finishing an MBA in England. What do you think of Rosie's politics?
Well, I don't agree with it. Frankly, I don't agree with it at all. To me, he could have done better.
Of all his talented children, he feels not one is worthy of succeeding him. Michael, the eldest.
All of us at one time or another, all of us, at 16 of us in the family, have worked with the old man from time to time, in one form or another, either on the estate or in building the cinema or on the farm or in the business, what have you. And we've all tended to stray away. My mother's that link, that constant link that keeps us linked to the family inextricably.
Were things very difficult for you?
Oh, very difficult in the beginning, things were hard. But, working all the time, making children working all the time.
What do you think about the way your kids have turned out? Michael, who was a cabinet minister, and Rosie, who was in jail in Canada.
Yes, I was very much depressed.
Why?
You see, he's in jail. It must make you feel bad, eh?
Did you feel disgraced? Or?
No, I didn't feel disgraced. I was feeling bad, really bad. Crying all the time, sometimes by myself. And I go to church, I pray a lot, and ask God for strength. I pray for him. And all these years, I was feeling very, very bad, much depressed.
How do you feel now that he's back in Dominica?
Well, I still feel very proud, but still I find he has no real job. He's just, moving about in his politics, I find.
You're worried that he's not settled down?
Yeah.
What kind of father was your husband to the boys? How do you feel he...
He was very hard.
Hard?
Oh, he wasn't joking with them at all. Very hard.
Hard in what way?
Yeah, well, they had to do their work, whatever he asked them to do, learn their lessons, and if they behave badly, he used to beat them with a rope.
From 8 in the morning till 8 at night, you can find her in the family store, sometimes wondering about her husband's wandering.
I take life as God gives it. I'm a person that always pray a lot.
I know that your husband has 10 children outside your marriage. How do you feel about the children, and how did you feel at the time when they were being born?
I still feel very bad. Is it 10? I don't think he has so many outside.
Did you ever feel jealous?
No, I never feel jealous. I just don't worry that at all. I don't feel, but I just feel bad. I mean, you're married, and I find it's just a bad example for his own children coming up. Just pray that God will make him leave that person. Well, sooner or later, he leaves that person, but he gets another one, and he keeps on going.
At the banana packing plant, the last load from the countryside is being washed and boxed for shipment. The manager is one of dozens of Dominicans Rosie arranged to visit Cuba to see socialism firsthand. For a while, Rosie's Cuban junkets, arranged and paid for by the Cuban Foreign Ministry, became so popular even the Premier's wife went along. But with independence coming for the island, the governing Labour Party was wary of appearing too leftist. The Premier also had a problem with Rosie's brother Michael, a rising star in the cabinet, openly challenging the Premier's leadership. So the Premier solved both problems by firing Michael from the cabinet, using Rosie's politics as an excuse. Mr. Christian, you're Deputy Premier, but also you're the Minister in charge of Education, Youth and Cooperatives. Can you tell me what the government has done? The Deputy Premier relishes the split in the Douglas family.
Rosie Douglas is a socialist, and he and his father are at variance, dangerously so. So much so that his father has told me to be wary of his son because he's an international opportunist.
Do you think that Rosie Douglas and his brother Michael Douglas were actually involved in revolutionary activities here?
That is exactly what precipitated the dismissal of his brother.
As a matter of fact, when I heard of the Premier's remark that there was a communist plot to overthrow the government by force, our organization, the Dominica-Cuba Friendship Association, wrote a letter to the Premier telling him, in fact, that we are concerned about his allegations and that if such a plot does exist in the country, those involved in it are bordering on conspiring to commit treason and they must be arrested and charged for treason. And he has not arrested anybody and charged him with treason yet.
Rosie Douglas to the people of Dominica is like pointing a red rag before a bull. And that is but among the young people, he has made certain strides.
In the spirit of reggae, the beat springs from the island's French patois. The music is spelled cadence and called cadaz. Dominica lies between the French islands of Martinique and Guadeloupe, so the cadaz sound is even catching on in France. This is Gramax, the #1 group, and they like Rosie. This is the kind of band he likes for his bandwagon. Sometimes their songs are as apolitical as a coconut, but sometimes they call for revolution against measures like the coconut law, which punishes the stealing of even a single coconut with up to a year in the island's steamy prison. Reformers have been making promises in Dominica for centuries, but every Friday, boxes with the Geest Banana Company label on them are loaded for shipment as they've always been loaded, on the backs and heads of some 200 women. From the warehouse 100 yards down the Geest Pier, where the bananas are ferried out to the Geest Star, the company's white freighter. Every 35-pound box of bananas earns a tally from the tallyman, a tally worth 2 cents. Young women with strong legs and good backs can earn $7 in a day. For many, that's a week's pay. Do you want to bring the old society tumbling down like this fort?
Well, in a sense, I mean, what this represents really is a period of our history that we would like to change, and upon these ruins, really to build a new society that is able to provide for the people a decent living standard.
When you talk about ruins, you're really talking about some kind of violence?
Violence only comes when everything else fails. I believe that we will be able to go through a peaceful transition in Dominica.
The sacking at Sir George was supposed to trigger a revolution in Dominica, according to RCMP informer Warren Hart. Warren Hart said that revolution was due to start here after the execution of 2 officials from Sir George. Was that true?
That, not to the best of my knowledge. I mean, there was no revolution planned. You don't plan revolution from outside the country in the first place. Warren Hart came into the black community and we met him, and at the time there were a number of black people in the United States that were running away from persecution, and we always greeted them with an open heart. Maybe we were naive, and if we were naive, I mean, I accept the blame for it.
Capitalism has served you very well. You're the son of one of the richest people in Portsmouth. You're a child of what you would call a bourgeoisie.
Well, you know, I always, sometimes when I speak to the workers, you know, on my father's estate, that question always comes up. The question is, I mean, is the dog wagging the tail or the tail wagging the dog? So my father really had to struggle against tremendous odds to be able to get to where he has gotten. But he was able to get to where he got because there was an abundance of cheap labor as well. And by virtue of utilizing that cheap labor, he was able to accumulate enough, at least to get his own children an education. So while I have a responsibility to him as my father and my family, who I try to always give the utmost respect, I also have a responsibility to the workers who produce that wealth, in fact, to enable me to get an education and to hope that one day that their children will get the same opportunity and more than I was able to get.
At a pier not far from the Douglas home, the bananas are loaded into the night. Michael Douglas, as MP for the area and son of RBD, has exercised his privilege and gone out to drink cold draft ale in the officers' mess aboard the Geest banana boat. Michael is a good politician who would like to be Prime Minister, but he likes the good life that comes from the traditional way of doing things. When Michael Douglas was called a communist, he said, I'm not a communist, I'm a Catholic, and laid the matter to rest. It's Easter on the island, and thousands as Catholic as Mother and Father Douglas recreate the way of the cross. The white priest and hymns of glorification, the rituals that help the church play its part in maintaining the old order. Rosie is one Douglas who's put his faith in other gods. Rosie wants many things for his island. He'd like to see tourists, a piano for the choir, and more Canadian aid. He acknowledges his debt to Canada. Guelph gave him a degree in agriculture he uses to good advantage in his organizing. Sir George gave him a political science degree and a lesson on political violence. Canada's prisons taught him how to survive in a jungle. With it all, Rosie would like to lead a revolution. But right now, it's Saturday night, and his Montreal Canadiens are playing the Washington Capitals. He won't get to sleep until he finds out who won.
Dictatorships have had an incredible impact in the past century.
These dictators ended up learning from one another.
They're all different, but many use the same tactics.
The use of terror,
Propaganda.
control the elite, create an enemy, cult of personality.
Use violence. These are tools that dictators use to stay in power.
Primer ministro, la Guardia de Honor está formada. Jefe de la Guardia, teniente coronel.
Nobody in this country, under any law in this country, including the Constitution, can prevent Roosevelt from being nominated.
We are rising for corruption. Who are afraid? Join us. Let us not forget what George W. Bush said. It is time to change course. We have to change course in this country. We have to move. These guys say, move to the next level. I say we need to move to the right level. Too much corruption in Dominica. Too much corruption.
What's typical of dictatorships is that the source of legitimacy is the people. You at least have to be able to claim to be from the people, loved by the people, and so on, not just from a single group in society, an elite.
Dominican Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit could find himself in hot water following allegations that he's the subject of a United States investigation. It's alleged that Mr. Skerrit is aware of a passport for sale scheme being operated within the country. Scene's Karika McIntyre has that story.
The claims were first published on this blog by one Kenneth Bridger, who describes himself as a financial crime consultant. The allegations that Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has issued Dominican diplomatic passports to supposed international criminals in exchange for investments in the Caribbean nation. One such person is Iranian businessman Ali Reza Monferred. Monferred was extradited to Iran in January 2017. He is accused of helping to embezzle millions of dollars while Iran evaded international oil sanctions. Here is what appears to be a copy of his Dominican diplomatic passport. But Dominican authorities maintained that this passport was revoked in January 2016. However, details surrounding the reason for the revocation has not been made. According to the website Travel Freedom, a Dominican diplomatic passport grants the holder of such passport access to 132 countries without prior visa, and that passport is ranked 40th in the world. Skerrit has already refuted claims as recently as December 2016 that Dominican diplomatic passports are for sale, amidst assertions by the country's opposition leader Lennox Linton. Linton appeared on American television program 60 Minutes, where he alleged that the Dominican leader was selling passports to North.
First of the modern dictators, the leader who shaved light and hitting, introduced, in a sense, the modern conception of dictatorship which claimed, at any rate, to spring from the people, not to be imposed from above.
Francesco Corralo, who at the time was on Interpol's list of most wanted criminals.
Parliamentarian Lennox Linton says no one in Dominica had ever heard of Corralo until he was stopped by authorities in Italy.
He said, "You can't detain me, I'm a diplomat." I said, "Diplomat? Diplomat of where?" He said, "Dominica."
Then there's Dominican diplomat Alison Madueke, a former Nigerian oil minister arrested for suspected bribery and money laundering. And Rudolph King, a Bahamian fugitive from U.S. Justice who is Dominica's ambassador to Bahrain.
What we were doing as an ambassador in Bahrain, I don't quite know, but they seem to think that there was some benefit in there for us.
Mr. Robert Mugabe, the Prime Minister of Zimbabwe. Once he was a Marxist guerrilla leader in the war against Rhodesia's whites. Now, Comrade Bob, as he's called, is due to hold elections. They're unlikely to be free and fair. He calls his opponents dissidents and wants to set up a one-party state.
Robert Mugabe was taking a critical step towards dictatorship. The political opposition would be outlawed.
One-party state.
It's really in keeping with our own traditions and our own philosophy of an African society.
The dissident party are destined not only for rejection, but for utter destruction as well.
I don't see the sense really in the multi-party state as you have it in Britain or in the United States or in Western Europe.
I am saying to people in Dominica that nobody and no groups of individuals are going to get me out, my government out, without going through the ballots of Dominica. And I will say finally, never take my silence for witness. I am measured with my approach with life. I have to be reason, I have to get reason to the forefront as the leader of the country. But let it be known that there should be no actions on the part of individuals in Dominica to overthrow this government. None. So if that's what is their intention, I'm sending a message to them. They better rethink the plan.
As though the time has come now, it's about to come for us to leave. This meeting will finish when it is finished. Because this is the Commonwealth of Dominica. It is not the Commonwealth of Roosevelt Skerrit. It is not the Commonwealth their professional lives. The police is standing ready. They are all around in battle fatigue. They have their guns, ready to do what? You want to shoot people for standing up? You want to shoot people for exercising their right to dissent? It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen. It is absolutely not going to happen. And this meeting will finish when the meeting is finished. I mean, we don't need permission from the police to have a meeting. But the police is illegally dictating that they must start now and stop now. We can go up to 11 o'clock tonight if we want, because we don't want to offend the Noise Abatement Act. And we can stop at 3 o'clock if we want. And we can start again at 4 o'clock, or we can start at 3:30. We can do what we want. We are the people of Dominica, and the power in people is greater than the people in power. You don't work for yourself, Daniel Carbon. You don't work for yourself, police officers. You work for the people of Dominica, and that is us. We are your employees, and you're going to listen to us this afternoon. The police will kill us in some people, yeah! Look like what I done there in that day! We need good, yeah, man! We are letting there in the house, man! Take your seat and let it happen inside the house, man! We not live in my box, no, man! Man, that is a disgrace! Oh, Lord, my God, in heaven! Papa God, save us! Save country! Save Dominica, my God, Lord Jesus! Oh, Lord, have mercy upon us! But I read inside my own detection, let me up, man, all inside my stomach hated me, man. I inhaled it, man, because I was talking, man. Oh, Lord, have mercy, my God.
If you go back to the turn of the 20th century, in 1908, there was a book published about the scourge of this massive army of lobbyists. And then in the 1920s, the 1940s, 1960s, every generation goes through an alarm discovery about how there's an explosion of lobbying. And that's been going on for over 100 years.
There are so many things wrong with our society. Everyone believes that our country is moving in the wrong direction. They believe it for one reason or another, but the root cause of this is that our elected representatives aren't representing the people alone. They are representing a few well-organized, very well-financed interests.
We cannot get any of our priorities through unless we fix our democracy and unless we fix the way, the role that money plays in our politics.
People are under the impression that the corruption only involves somebody handing over a check and getting a favor, and that's not the case.
Corruption has been long understood by the Supreme Court as guarding against undue access, undue influence that large donors will receive in exchange for their political contributions.
In the 1970s, legal scholarship seemed to move away from this definition. In fact, seemed to forget what our founding fathers had written into law and into regulation to prevent corruption.
The 1976 Supreme Court case, Buckley v. Vallejo, has been interpreted as explicitly limiting the scope of what constitutes corruption, effectively disregarding any other form of corruption other than bribery, which was already illegal.
The Supreme Court has a very strange definition of corruption. It defines it as only quid pro quo.
It's taken corruption from being understood as undue access and undue influence to basically just saying you can't have bribery. You can't.
Mr. Skerrit, the villas at Savannah Pie, just past Portsmouth, do you have an interest in those villas? Go to hell! Go to hell! Go to hell!
The Prime Minister normally come at my home, and some of the buildings are close to my building. And the Prime Minister, I mean, a long time he haven't been at my home because he don't want people to say that he come in to see those buildings of his.
We need to send a strong message to those who strive and thrive on politics of gossip, lies, innuendo, and propaganda. We need to bring an end to the politics of division, the politics of lies. And Skerrit must go because of the severe crisis of confidence into which our Dominica has been plunged by his actions and his associations with international racketeers, with money launderers, with fugitives from justice who pose continuing threats to global peace and security. Right now as we speak, the Royal Bank of Canada on Bayfront has closed down the government's passport account. The only reason it could do that is because that international bank is worried that the government of Dominica is connected to money laundering. The government of Dominica is involving itself with moving the proceeds of crime. The government of Dominica is involved in maybe activities that are about the financing of terrorism. Daniel Carwan should be arresting Rufus Skerrit today to find out what is happening with all this criminality going on in Dominica, and it's coming to peaceful people in Dominica to harass us. He's coming to peaceful people to harass us. Montferred is a Montaniel. Nobody interfered with him.
Your neighbor!
They came to my house to search.
Those wicked souls.
But Montferred was here, a big international criminal.
Yes.
And no police officer was interested.
As President Nicolas Maduro pushed through controversial political changes. Maduro has come in for tough criticism from President Trump and some Latin American leaders. Through it all, rates of hunger and crime have skyrocketed. In a rare interview, Maduro sat down with NewsHour's special correspondent Ryan Chilcote at an energy summit today in Moscow.
President Trump has upped his criticism of you and your administration since the creation of the Constituent Assembly. And I want to read you a quote from President Trump that he made, a statement that he made at the General Assembly. He said, "The Venezuelan people are starving and their country is collapsing. Their democratic institutions are being destroyed. This situation is completely unacceptable and we cannot stand by and watch." As far as I know, Mr. President, you haven't spoken with President Trump. If you do, what will you say to him, and what would you say now to the American people?
Al pueblo norteamericano nosotros siempre le decimos la verdad.
I would say to the U.S. people the truth, and we've always done so. Venezuela wants only one thing: respect. The time of U.S. interference in the social and political life of Latin America and the Caribbean should be left behind. Venezuela is the object of desire of ruling circles in Washington for two reasons. Our riches, the riches of our country. We have the largest proven reserves of oil in the world. We have growing reserves of natural gas. We are number 8 in terms of gas reserves in the world, and these reserves are growing because on top of oil, we are also exploring some gas deposits. Now, Venezuela raised the flag of a new model of waking up the peoples on our continent, but they want to suppress this idea, this example. It's not just about Trump, because Trump is reading his notes. He doesn't even know where Venezuela is on the map. He doesn't even know where Puerto Rico is. He did not know that. He went to Puerto Rico and he came there during the tragedy and insulted them. These are our brothers. If you say to him Simón Bolívar, he thinks that's a rocker, a singer. He doesn't know who that is. He repeats what the Pentagon writes for him. My voice will never shut up, and my voice will be loud always, with or without Trump. Trump is rude. He is telling me he's going to deal with us and end us. But even with Trump, Venezuela will keep moving forward and will fight for this destiny.
I'd like to ask you about that. President Trump has not ruled out military action in Venezuela. Do you take that threat seriously?
El foro de energía. Me está llenando de energía.
This is a forum on energy. Of course, we can discuss other types of energy, spiritual energy. Let's take a look at this. The president of the largest, the most powerful military power in the world has no right to joke or not be serious. The people of Venezuela are rebellious people. We fight for our freedom. And of course, we have certain threats. Venezuela has no weapons of mass destruction. We have no nuclear weapons, no strategic weapons. We have no significant armed forces or military places abroad. We are a modest country in this sense. And all of a sudden, Trump threatens to attack Venezuela by military force. Of course, all Latin America and Caribbean countries oppose that. And I think the U.S., despite anything, they will have some minimum common sense.
Venezuela has one of the largest collections of Russian arms in the region. Amidst this threat of intervention, you're here in Moscow. Will you be, or are you asking President Putin for military assistance and more weapons?
Ya la tenemos.
But not many, but some people in this world have criticized Petrocaribe, criticized Alba, demonized President Chavez and President Maduro and the people of Venezuela. But it is those very same instruments of integration and cooperation that are serving as a lifeblood to many of our countries across Latin America and the Caribbean. And it speaks to the vision of President Chavez, who always told us that integration is what is required in Latin America and the Caribbean and in the world in order for us to get our people out of poverty, to create a better way of life for our people, to give our people hope, and to give a voice to the millions who are voiceless. And we have seen the progression, we have seen the successes. Prior to this storm, and in large measure because of the generosity of the government and people of Venezuela, using the instruments of ALBA, using the instruments of Petrocaribe, we were able here in Dominica to significantly reduce the levels of poverty because of our investments in education, our investments in agriculture, our investments in housing, our investments in infrastructure, creating a better way of life for people. Mr. President, we will always be eternally grateful.
Continuaré apoyando muy fuertemente la revolución cubana.
And continue to ask the United States to end the blockade against Cuba.
Y continuaré también pidiendo a Estados Unidos que terminen el bloqueo contra Cuba.
And to free the Cuban five who are imprisoned in Cuba illegally.
Y también para que liberen a los 5 cubanos que están ilegalmente presos en Estados Unidos.
Gracias. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Viva Bell cocoa jelly.
Machine.
Ah, paje.
Ice machine.
Sengu. Buy one, get one free.
I want some parsley.
Come,
Miss my lady, winning nice parsley. Nous sortir l'habitation pour Vandawe. Nous capables de meilleur manger, nous bat tous monde. Nous travaillons pour planter. Les gens apprécient ça, nous pas. Nous pas contents. Nous sortir l'habitation pour Vandawe. Nous capables de meilleur manger, nous bat tous monde. Nous travaillons pour planter. Les gens apprécient ça, nous pas. Nous pas contents. Nous ni belle banane, nous ni belle cachine, nous ni belle chou-pomme, nous ni belle farine, moi ni belle concombre, moi ni belle tomate, moi ni belle laitue, moi ni belle cheddar, nous ni belle couche-couche, nous ni belle coco, nous ni belle yampe. Pani waj majodi. Eh bien, si on parle équité, nous sortir l'habitation pour Vandawe. Nous travaillons plus meilleur manger, nous bat tous monde. Nous travaillons pour planter. Les gens apprécient ça, nous va. Nous pas contents. Nous sortir l'habitation pour Vandawe. Nous travaillons plus meilleur manger, nous bat tous monde. Nous travaillons pour planter, et on apprécie ça, nous va. Nous pas contents.
Uno bongo besolite, el matador entera, vai para criminal. Uno bongo besolite, el matador entera, vai para criminal. Unite, sisite, el matador entera, vai para criminal. Uno bongo besolite, el matador entera, vai para criminal. Unite, sisite, el matador entera, vai para criminal.
Pas changer l'année passée, les moyens
est point pas laisser moi. Non, 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 gardez no one no make it now. Non, 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 gardez no one no make it now. Pour pas changer dans le passé, prêt aller à cache de one. Gardez no one no make it now. On est point pas laisser moi. Oh, yo, yo, mama. Why, I do. When it is joy to give it up, you lay on fountain.
Come and see realize